Hello and welcome to Strait Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. Almost two-thirds of the world's population experience severe water scarcity every year, according to the UNICEF. In the Middle East, with areas already suffering from low rainfall and drought, the mismanaging of water resources is adding to the political tensions in the region. Hadia Al-Alawi has this report.
Water scarcity isn't new in the Middle East. Home to only 1% of the world's freshwater resources, the region has been experiencing the most severe dry spell in 900 years. But water mismanagement and conflict over shared water resources is escalating the problem, and it's having a devastating effect on the agriculture industry.
This land used to be much better. We used to grow crops in a bigger area 4 or 5 years ago. Now we don't have enough water.
A UN report says the climate crisis is intensifying the water cycle by bringing rising temperatures and more frequent and severe weather events, such as extreme droughts in many regions, including in the Middle East. Increasing global freshwater withdrawals, primarily associated with the expansion of irrigated agriculture in drylands, has also led to global groundwater depletion. And the pitfalls of failing to reform water management is clear. Iranians in the city of Isfahan have been protesting for weeks over a lack of clean drinking water. Water has been diverted away from farmland through underground pipes towards industrial complexes in the province of Yazid.
We have very poor agriculture infrastructure. We need support from the government because farmers don't have enough money to upgrade irrigation methods. Here, the government should step in and boost water consumption efficiency.
Neighboring Turkey is also experiencing the country's most severe drought in a decade. Turkey has been building dams upstream of the Tigris River to address its dwindling water supplies, but the projects are limiting water flow to Iraq. Around 70% of Iraq's water supplies flow from neighboring countries, especially via the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which run through Turkey. Inefficient flood irrigation methods and the growing of water-intensive crops, such as rice, are also compounding the problem in Iraq. In Mosul, drought has pushed this farmer out of employment.
I stopped working in agriculture because of the lack of rain, the increase in drought, and the lack of support from the government.
Conflict over diminishing water resources is likely to continue in the Middle East, and the solution to it is complex. Good water governance, combined with advanced technologies and cooperation on shared resources, could offer a way out of this crisis, but appears unlikely anytime soon. Hadia Al-Alawi, Strait Talk.
And joining me now from London is Karim Elgendy. He is an associate fellow at Chatham House and the founder of Carboun, an advocacy initiative promoting sustainability in the MENA region. And in Washington, D.C. is Nik Kowsar, an environmental analyst and geologist. Gentlemen, welcome to Strait Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Karim, what is the current water situation in the region? How dire it is?
It's pretty dire. The year-long drought that we saw in Iran is probably one of the worst in half a century. Iran this year received half of its annual rainfall. South of Turkey is also experiencing a similar, albeit different, drought for 3 years now with reduced rainfall. The heat wave that we saw in Turkey is considered to be the hottest since the 1980s, and Turkey has recorded its highest temperature since the 1960s during that heat wave. In Iraq and Syria, we were seeing a reduction in rainfall again, but these are different because they're from Iran and from Turkey, reducing their surface water availability from the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Carboun, and the Karka. And the East Anatolian project alone is estimated to have reduced surface water in Iraq by 60%.
Yeah.
So Iraq is struggling, and they're reducing the agricultural season by 50% as a result.
So, Nik, why has the Middle East been affected by droughts the most? I mean, what are the core reasons? What is causing this crisis, both in Iraq and Iran?
The easiest answer is climate change, but that's not a good answer because we climatize everything and put the blame on the climate. We have known since at least 1988 that the climate is going to have a greater impact on water resources. There was a report, The Politics of Scarcity, in 1988 that warned many leaders that the region is going to have a very bad situation. But the problem is many leaders just wanted to collect water on the surface without understanding the value of groundwater. And instead of recharging their aquifers, they depleted their aquifers and they used most of their resources for farming, agriculture, everything. And what's happening right now is that many leaders in the region do not still understand the impact of climate change and choose the worst policies. And I'm talking mostly about Iran, that has built over 650 dams in the last 40 years and has destroyed water resources, especially groundwater resources.
So, Karim, which one weighs heavier on the current crisis? We blame everything for the climate change, but warming temperatures or mismanagement, or they're all interconnected?
There's a combination. To start with, the MENA region in general has the world's highest level of interannual hydrological variability, which means that the changes in rainfall varies from one year to the other. So one year you could have a drought, another year you could have a devastating flood. And climate change, with its increasing variability, one of the characteristics of climate change, will only make this worse. So as a result, we have seen increasing temperatures in Turkey, in Iraq, in Iran, reduced precipitation. But then on top of this, we also have the water management issue, which is specifically an Iranian and an Iraqi issue more than a Turkish issue.
So, Nik, how has water scarcity been impacting the regional countries' agriculture, and where does the current situation leave them in terms of food security?
One big problem is that some countries, especially Iran, want to be self-sufficient because of their one, ideology, two, because they have messed up everything in the region and they're facing sanctions. So let's say the Islamic Republic of Iran needs to produce more food. But the problem is they don't have enough water. And the impact would be on mostly groundwater as the main source in rural areas. What has happened is that many groundwater resources have been depleted, aquifers have been depleted, and millions of Iranians have had to leave rural areas for the city margins, shanty towns, and this has caused a big gap between different parts of the society. And since 2017, we have seen the impact of this big gap between different parts of the society. And the first groups that actually come to the street and react to whatever economical problem the government has are mostly people living in marginal areas. And many people from these parts have been killed in unrest since 2017.
So, Karim, what should be done to ensure food security? Is there a concrete roadmap for this? And is shifting to different crops a solution?
Technically, yes. I think the struggle with Iran is that Iran tries to grow everything, including the crops that require a lot of water due to the sanctions. So it's an unusual situation in a country that is already having issues with water availability. But in other countries, this is not always the case. So you can always prioritize and shift to crops that are more water efficient. I think the Iranian case is a really severe case in the confluence between the political, the security, and the environmental issues all coming together.
So, Nik, what are the alternatives to the traditional irrigation methods, and what holds back these Middle Eastern countries to use them? Are they too expensive?
Look, in Iran, we consume over 90% of our renewable water resources. That's a disaster. We have to reduce that. Two, we have to choose what crop we actually want to produce. And the other thing is that Iran needs to have a better solution to its politics and have better conditions with other countries to import more food and be efficient in water management. The bigger problem is that, you know, the story of Joseph, we had 7 years of prosperity and 7 years of drought. Okay, Iran has had lots of years of prosperity in a way compared to what we are facing right now, and didn't use those years to recharge its aquifers and manage its water resources. Instead, it built major dams in the years of drought. We've had this drought since 2001.
So, Karim, we know Israel is using a drip irrigation technique as the UAE and Saudi Arabia desalinating the seawater. Why do you think these regional countries are not using these techniques? Do politics stand in the way, or they're too expensive?
It's a slow transformation. It's a really hard thing to transform a country, for example, like Egypt, which is used to a flooding technique for irrigation, and the soil has got used to it. The amount of nutrient, the amount of pollution that is already in the soil due to the use of fertilizers makes it very hard to then transition to a different type. So those countries, when they do embark on new agricultural projects, a new agricultural land that is being regenerated for food production, in those cases, they do use those new technologies, but they find it much harder technically to transform land and agricultural areas that are already being used into a new, from one agricultural system to another.
So, Nik, since there's no legal framework to regulate water sharing among riparian countries and Turkey being the upstream country, how could sides work together to solve this problem and solve their differences over water resources?
First of all, we have to, in a way, democratize water management in the whole region. And countries that have mutual, let's say, water basins, Turkey, Iran, and Iraq are mutual in a way in the Tigris-Euphrates water basin. People don't have a say in managing these resources, these basins. That's one problem. Two, when Turkey builds so many dams in the north, Iran will face some problems in the south. So there should be a mutual understanding about all these things. Two, we need something like a water NATO in the whole region. Israel should help Iranians, Iranians should help Israelis, Jordanians, Afghans, all the region in the near future. It's not a matter of nationality or national pride. It's about being able to live in this situation. And because of the worsening climate situation, we are going to face a very bad situation in the near future, and that is sad.
Yeah, Karim, what would you like to say if no measures are taken, what the region will look like in the next few decades?
Sure. I mean, unless we act, that's a caveat there. Countries like Iran, for example, will experience more frequent and more severe heat waves. They will experience more droughts and also more floods over the next 30 years or so, so up to the middle of the century. Also, under the worst-case climate change scenario, the average temperature could rise by up to 6 degrees in Iran, again, by the end of the century. Summer temperatures, maximum summer temperatures in places like Ahvaz and Khuzestan could reach up to 60 degrees. Smaller increases in other parts, for example, in Iraq and Turkey, could also be seen, but not to the same extent. But in the Eastern Mediterranean, we're expecting a reduction in precipitation of up to 25% under the worst case scenario. And remember that the Mediterranean is a very unique place. It's a hotspot for climate change where we're getting less rain and also increase in temperature.
So, Nik, a very quick question, if you please. Are we going to see new conflicts and security risks triggered by water shortages and drought in the region? Very quickly, please.
Under these leaders, absolutely. And I want to add something quickly. Israelis don't use desalinated water for agriculture. They use the treated wastewater coming from desalinated water for agriculture. But many countries have to understand the price of desalinated water is too much. So we have to take care of every drop of that water. And we'll face a very bad situation if we don't pay attention to the carbon footprint of desalination.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.